At my mom's birthday banquet, my sister asked me to stand beside her for a surprise speech. Then she announced I had broken mom's heart since childhood. 50 people stared at my plate. I picked up the gift bag, said, "Happy birthday," then walked past the photographer without looking back. My sister spent 6 minutes telling 50 people that I had broken our mother's heart since childhood. She did this at a birthday banquet she organized. She did this at a microphone she handed me 2 minutes before. She did this while I was standing right next to her, holding a gift bag and a short toast I had written on the drive over. What she did not know was that I had spent the last 3 years quietly preparing for exactly this kind of moment. Not because I saw it coming, because I knew her. My name is Brett. I am 34 years old. I have been a structural engineer at Meridian Construction in Dallas for 11 years. I own my house outright. No mortgage, no debt, no financial entanglements with anyone in my family. I built that position deliberately over a decade because I watched what happened to people who could not say no. I call my mother Carol every Sunday at 7 in the morning. That has been true for 6 years. She is usually awake by 6:30, the coffee is already made, and she talks for 40 minutes without needing me to say much. She tells me about the neighbor's new car, the book club she almost quit twice, the weather in a way that sounds like she is reporting on something meaningful. I listen. I ask 1 or 2 questions. That is the structure of our relationship, and it has worked. 3 years ago, Carol needed knee replacement surgery. She had been putting it off for 2 years because she was certain her insurance would not cover the full procedure. In January of that year, her doctor told her the cartilage had deteriorated to the point where waiting another year risked permanent joint damage. She filed the claim. Her insurance denied it in March on a procedural technicality. A form field had been filled out incorrectly by the submitting physician's office. $31,000 denied over a checkbox. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon. She asked, in the casual tone she used when she did not want to seem like she was asking, whether I knew anything about medical payment plans, whether hospitals offered them for larger procedures. I asked her to send me the denial letter. I read it that evening. I called the hospital billing department Wednesday morning and confirmed the out-of-pocket cost. Thursday afternoon, I transferred $31,040 in 2 payments from my savings account. I emailed Carol the confirmation number and told her the surgery was paid for and that I did not want to discuss the amount and that I needed one thing from her in return. She asked what? I said, "Do not tell anyone." She agreed. She had the surgery in April. I drove up for 2 days during recovery, stocked her refrigerator, set up the ice machine the physical therapist recommended, and drove home. Nobody else in the family knew I had paid. As far as anyone was told, insurance had eventually come through. That was the kind of relationship we had. Not performative, not documented for an audience. Just what actually happened. My sister Renee is 37. She lives 20 minutes from Carol, which in practical terms means she has proximity and I have a 6-hour drive. She has built her entire identity inside that 20-minute radius. She organizes the dinners. She texts the group chat. She is the one who calls the relatives on their birthdays and posts the throwback photos on anniversaries and shows up at Carol's door with groceries when the weather turns bad. None of that is nothing. I want to be clear about that. Renee does real things for Carol in real time in ways I cannot from Dallas. That is genuinely valuable, and I have never argued otherwise. What I have a problem with is the accounting. The way she keeps a ledger in her head of who has contributed and who has not, and how that ledger is constructed entirely from visible contributions and nothing else. 3 incidents make this concrete. In 2014, I was accepted to UT Austin for my master's in structural engineering. Full merit scholarship, tuition, and housing both covered, based entirely on my undergraduate GPA and a research paper I had submitted the previous spring. I called Carol from the parking lot of my apartment building the afternoon the letter arrived. She said she was proud of me. That same evening, she told the couple next door that Renee had helped me get in through family connections. Renee had graduated from a community college in 2009. She had no connection to UT Austin in any professional or academic capacity. Carol was not lying to be malicious. She needed Renee to be part of the good things that happened, so she inserted her. The second incident was Carol's 60th birthday. I called the restaurant in January for an April reservation. I coordinated with 12 family members about the date. I paid the deposit in February and the remaining balance the week of the dinner. The total was $942. I arrived at the restaurant early to confirm the seating arrangement. Renee arrived 20 minutes after the guests. She stood at the front of the room and gave a 12-minute speech about her memories of Carol growing up, her favorite things about being Carol's daughter, what Carol had meant to her over the years. It was genuinely moving. Several people cried. At the end, she thanked everyone for coming as though she had assembled the room herself. I ate my steak at the far end of the table and said nothing. The third incident was last summer. Carol mentioned in a Sunday call that the garage was becoming unusable. One of the shelving units had partially collapsed. The floor paint was peeling in a way that had become slippery, and the overhead light had been out for 2 months. I found a contractor through a referral from a colleague, got 3 quotes, selected the one with the best documented reviews, and paid the deposit the following week. The total job cost $620. The contractor finished in 3 days. Renee drove over on the second day of the work. She stood in the driveway for 45 minutes. She brought Carol lunch. She took a photo of herself next to the contractor's truck and sent it to Carol with the caption, "Supervising the renovation for you, Mom." Carol saved that photo. She mentioned it to me the following Sunday in the same breath as the contractor's work. She described both as though they had equal weight. There was a pattern underneath those 3 incidents that took me years to name correctly. I was the infrastructure. Renee was the event. The infrastructure made everything possible, and the event was what people remembered. That is not an unusual arrangement in families. What made it unusual was that Renee had started to believe the event was the entire story, that her presence at things was the same as the work that made those things exist. Understanding the pattern did not make me angry. By 34, it was just a fact I design around, the way you account for soil conditions before you lay a foundation. You do not argue with the conditions. You adjust the design. What I had not designed for was Renee deciding the conditions needed to be announced at a birthday banquet in front of 50 people. The banquet was held at Riverside Hall, a venue Renee had rented for the occasion. $80 a plate, 50 guests, white tablecloths, a photographer Renee had hired walking the perimeter of the room, taking candids before dinner started. I had sent Carol a gift basket 2 days before. Lavender soap, a cashmere throw, a bottle of the sparkling grape juice she liked because she did not drink, and a card with a handwritten note inside. I wanted her to have something that was just hers before the event, before the room, and the speeches and the photographs made everything communal. I arrived at 6:15, found my seat, said hello to the relatives I had not seen in a year, made conversation with Uncle Doug near the bar for a few minutes. Renee found me at 6:40 near the coat check. She was in a green dress, and she was smiling the way she smiled when she was pleased with how something was going. She said she wanted us to do a joint speech. Said it would mean the world to Mom. Said if the 2 of us did it together, it would be the part of the night Carol talked about for years. I said sure. I had a toast half written in my head anyway. Nothing long. A minute, maybe 90 seconds. Something honest. At 7:04, Renee stood at the microphone at the front of the room and gestured for me to join her. I walked up. She handed me the mic with both hands and stepped aside. I looked out at the room, 50 people at round tables, Carol at the center table with her hands folded on the tablecloth, and I started to think about where to begin. Renee stepped forward and took the microphone back. She said she wanted to say a few things first. She started warmly, the way she always did. She talked about Carol's strength, the way she had raised 2 kids without a template, the way she made people feel like the most important person in the room. The guests nodded. Someone near the back started tearing up. The photographer moved to get a better angle. Then Renee said, "Before we celebrate everything Mom has given us, I think it is important to be honest about what she has carried." She looked at me, and then she spent 6 minutes telling 50 people that I had been breaking Carol's heart for as long as she could remember. She said I was cold. She said I missed Carol's surgery recovery, that while Carol was in a hospital bed, I was in Dallas living my life. She said I never contributed to family events, that every gathering was organized and funded by people who actually showed up. She said I made Carol cry at holidays, arriving late or leaving early, or introducing some tension that turned the afternoon into something people recovered from rather than remembered fondly. She said Carol had spent years reaching toward me and getting back something that felt like obligation rather than love. She said the family had watched this happen and said nothing, and she was saying it now because she loved me and because their mother deserved better. By the third minute, the room was quiet in a different way than rooms go quiet during speeches. It was the quiet of people deciding where to look. I stood at that microphone, and I did not move. I did not interrupt. I did not look at the floor or at Renee. I looked at the back wall of the banquet room, at a framed print of a Tuscan vineyard that nobody in that room had chosen, and I kept my face neutral, and I let her finish every sentence. When she was done, she handed me the microphone with the expression of someone who had just done something courageous. I held the microphone for 2 seconds. Then I set it on the stand. I walked to where Carol was sitting at the head table. I set the gift bag down in front of her. I looked at her face, which was unreadable in a way that told me she had known something was coming, and I said, "Happy birthday, Mom." Then I turned and walked past the photographer, through the lobby, and into the parking lot. I sat in my truck for 4 minutes with the engine off. I was not composing myself. I was thinking about the framed vineyard print on the back wall and the fact that no one had ever asked whether it fit the space. Then I started the engine and drove home. I called Carol 2 days later, 7 in the morning. Same as always. She answered on the second ring and asked about work. She told me the gift basket was beautiful. She said the lavender soap smelled like something she remembered but could not place. I let her talk for 10 minutes. Then I said, "Did you know what Renee was planning to say at the banquet?" The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. She said, "Renee just want to clear the air?" I said, "That is not what I asked." A longer pause. Then, she mentioned she was going to say a few things. I did not know exactly what she planned to say. I said, "Okay, I will talk to you Sunday." And I hung up. Carol had known. Not every word, maybe, but she had known something was coming, and she had not warned me. She had let me walk into that room holding a gift bag and a toast I had not gotten to deliver. That afternoon, I texted my cousin Teresa and asked if she knew why I had stopped receiving messages in the family group chat 6 months ago. I had assumed it had gone quiet. Teresa took 2 hours to respond. When she did, she said, "Brett, I am really sorry. Renee told the group that you had been pulling away on purpose and that she wanted to have a family conversation about it without it feeling confrontational to you. She said the banquet speech was going to be a loving intervention. Most of us thought it was the right thing at the time. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down and made a coffee. Renee had removed me from the family group chat 6 months before the banquet. She had briefed the family. She had named the speech a loving intervention so that by the night of the event, the room was already halfway framed before she opened her mouth. The silence of those 50 people was not a reaction to what she said. It was a confirmation of what they had already been told. I finished the coffee. Then I opened my laptop. I spent that evening building a folder. The knee surgery invoice came up immediately in my email archive. $31,040 across 2 transfers. My account, my name on both receipts, dated April 3 years ago. I printed it. The contractor receipts were in my bank app under Sent Payments. $620, Carol's address, the contractor's business name, my card. Printed. The restaurant invoice from Carol's 60th was in my email under a thread titled Deposit Confirmation. $942. My card number, ending in the digits I still have memorized. Printed. I also pulled the insurance denial letter. I had saved it as a PDF at the time because the reason for denial struck me as the kind of bureaucratic absurdity worth remembering. A checkbox error on a form submitted by the physician's billing office. $31,000 stopped by a missing tick mark. Printed. I called Marcus that evening. He is a family attorney, went to UT with me, and is one of the few people whose judgment I trust entirely because he has never once told me what I wanted to hear when what I needed to hear was different. I walked him through the banquet. What Renee said, the size of the room, the professional photographer, the fact that I had documentation contradicting every financial accusation she made publicly. Marcus said, "Do not post anything. Do not call anyone in the family. Do not reach out to Renee. Let her come to you. When she does, record it. Texas is one-party consent." I said, Already downloaded the app. He said, good. Send me whatever she says when she calls. I knew she would call. Renee always came back to assess the damage after she made a move. It was the most predictable thing about her. She called on day 3, 11 in the morning. She opened with warmth, which was her standard entry point when she needed something to settle correctly. She said she had been thinking about me. Said she hoped I was doing okay. Said the family was concerned about how I left that night. I said, go ahead. She said the family felt I had overreacted. Said walking out had made Carol's birthday harder than it needed to be. Said she understood I had feelings about what she said, but that removing myself from the room was not the way to handle it. I said nothing. She filled the silence. Said she thought we should sit down so I could explain my behavior. Not accusatory, she said, just so the family could understand where I was coming from. I said, Renee, say that again. Slowly. A pause. Then she repeated it almost verbatim. I think we should sit down so you can explain your behavior. We all just want to understand. I said, perfect. Thank you. I will be in touch. She said, what does that mean? I said, it means I heard you clearly. Then I ended the call. The recording was clean. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Renee had just asked me, on a line I was legally recording, to sit in a room in front of the family she had spent 6 months preparing against me and explain myself. She delivered it like it was reasonable. That was the most revealing part, not the content of what she said, but the tone. She genuinely believed that was a fair ask. I emailed the audio to Marcus that night and saved a second copy to my cloud drive under a folder I labeled simply, Documentation. Melissa had been at the banquet. She was seated at table 4, and I had noticed her during the speech because she was the only person in the room whose face showed discomfort rather than solemnity. Everyone else was nodding or looking at their plates. Melissa was watching Renee with an expression that looked like someone watching a car accident in slow motion. I found her on LinkedIn through Renee's connections. I sent a short message. I said I was not looking to cause problems for anyone, and she was under no obligation to respond, but that if she was willing to talk, I would appreciate it. She replied within an hour and asked if we could meet for coffee. We met Thursday morning at a place on Greenville Avenue. She was already there when I arrived, hand around a mug, looking like someone who had been thinking about this conversation for days. She said, I want you to know I almost did not go to that banquet. I said, why? She said, because 2 weeks before it, Renee sent me a voice memo with the speech written out. She asked me to listen for timing, whether it was too long, whether the transitions worked between sections. I told her I thought some of the accusations were too harsh. She said they needed to be said. She sent me a revised version 4 days later. I asked if she still had either recording. She pulled out her phone and forwarded both files to me at the table. I listened to 30 seconds of the first one with one earbud in. It was Renee's voice, measured and rehearsed, hitting every accusation in the exact order she had delivered them at the banquet. She had timed the pauses. She had practiced the line about loving me before she said the hardest things. I thanked Melissa. I paid for the coffees. I drove to my office and forwarded both memos to Marcus. He called me that afternoon. He said, Brett, you now have a recorded call in which Renee asks you to justify yourself to the family. You have 2 voice memos demonstrating the speech was written and rehearsed over at least a 2-week period. You have a witness willing to confirm she received and reviewed the draft. And you have 4 documents directly contradicting every financial accusation she made in front of 50 people. I said, I know what I want to do. I want Carol to see the real picture first. I did not call Carol. A phone call gave her room to manage the conversation, to redirect toward intentions rather than facts. I sent an email on a Sunday evening at 9:14. The subject line read, for your records. The body of the email contained one sentence. I wanted you to have the actual receipts. Since we're being honest now. Attached were 4 documents. The knee surgery invoice, the garage contractor payment confirmation, the restaurant invoice from her 60th birthday dinner, and the insurance denial letter from 3 years ago, the one that explained why I paid out of pocket in the first place. Carol called me 43 minutes later. She did not cry when she started. She asked questions, one after another, working through something in real time. She asked if the surgery payment was mine. I said yes. She asked why I had never told her. I said she had asked me not to tell anyone, and I had respected that. She asked if Renee knew I had paid. I said, Renee told you insurance covered it. Silence. Then, she told me in the car on the way home from the hospital. She said she had called the insurance company and sorted out the appeal herself. I said, I know. Carol did not speak for a long moment. Then she said she needed to make a call and would call me tomorrow. I said, okay. We hung up. I did not know what happened between Carol and Renee that night. I did not ask. I had given Carol the documents and the one sentence she needed to read the pattern clearly. What she did with it belonged entirely to her. The photographer Renee hired had posted the banquet gallery to his business page 4 days after the event. 43 photos across 2 albums. Venue shots, table arrangements, photos of Carol laughing with relatives, and 3 photos taken during the speech. 3 days before the gallery went live, I had sent Aunt Patricia a single document, just a surgery invoice, nothing else. I wrote one sentence in the message. I thought you should have the full picture before forming an opinion about what happened at the banquet. Patricia was Carol's older sister. She had been at the banquet. She had known this family longer than any version of the story Renee was telling had existed. She did not respond to my message. I did not follow up. 2 days after the gallery posted, Patricia left a comment on the photo of Renee at the microphone. It read, "This was a beautiful evening until the speech. Brett has quietly done more for Carol than most people in that room know. He deserved better that night." The comment accumulated 34 likes in the time it took Renee to contact the photographer and have the post removed. By then, the screenshot was moving through the same family group chat I had been removed from 6 months earlier. I did not comment on the photo. I did not forward the screenshot. I did not send a single message to anyone in the family about it. I had given Patricia one document and one sentence. She made her own decision. That was the entire difference between what I did and what Renee had done over 6 months. Renee had choreographed 50 people. I had told one person the truth and stepped back. Renee's husband, Greg, texted me 11 days after the banquet. I did not have his number saved. He introduced himself in the opening message. He wrote, "I owe you an apology. I did not know the speech was pre-written. I was told it was going to be a few kind words and something about bringing the family closer together. I should have asked more questions before that night. I am sorry, Brett." I read it twice. I put my phone in my desk drawer and finished the load calculations I was working on for the Westfield project. I did not respond. Not because I held anything against Greg. Because whatever was happening inside his house was a separate situation, and I was not part of it and did not need to be. 3 weeks later, Renee's Instagram profile changed. The couple photos were gone. The tag posts with Greg disappeared. The profile picture became a solo shot taken somewhere with good light and a neutral background. I noticed it the way you notice a shift in weather. As information, not as a verdict. 6 months passed. Carol and I did not have one large conversation that resolved everything. We had the same conversation we always had every Sunday at 7 in the morning, and over time the texture of it changed. In month 2, she apologized without me asking. She said she had known something was wrong in the family for a long time and had chosen not to examine it directly. She said she was sorry for letting me walk into that room. I said I appreciated her saying that. Then she told me about the book club and the neighbor's new car, and we moved on. She did not mention Renee in our Sunday calls after that. I did not ask. In month 4, Meridian gave me the lead position on the Westfield Bridge project. $12 million contract. 14-month build timeline. My name on the engineering certification. I told my team on a Monday morning. We went to lunch. I was back at my desk by 1:30 and spent the afternoon reviewing the first round of structural drawings. Renee sent a long message in month 4. She said she missed me, said the family did not feel right without me in it, said she had been doing a lot of thinking and that she took responsibility for how the speech had landed, that she had not intended it to go the way it did, said she hoped we could find a way back to each other. I read it on a Wednesday evening after I had eaten dinner and washed the dishes. I read it once, all the way through. Then I set my phone on the counter and dried my hands. I did not reply. Not that night, not that week, not after. Not because I wanted to punish her or because I was still in the injury of it. I sat with the message for a few days until I understood what I actually felt. What I understood by the end of that week was that I had no response. The version of the family she was describing, the one she wanted to return to, had never actually existed. She had been performing inside a story for 20 years, and I had been quietly funding it, and somewhere in that arrangement, she had convinced herself that the performance was the real relationship, that the presence was the same as the foundation. It was not. It had never been. And I was not interested in going back to a structure that had been built that way. My house was quiet on Wednesday evenings. I made dinner. I worked on the Westfield drawings when I brought them home. I went to bed at 10:30. On Sundays, I called Carol at 7, and she talked, and I listened. In month 5, I drove back to the neighborhood where Carol and Renee and I had lived until I was 12. The garage where my father used to park is a storage unit now. The oak tree in the front yard is still there. I sat at the curb for a few minutes and thought about what it costs to keep a version of a family alive that has stopped being accurate. The answer is everything you have, paid out in installments small enough that you do not notice the total until someone runs the numbers in front of 50 people. The Westfield project kept me busy through the fall. We hit the first milestone in October, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. My project manager sent the team a brief email with the words "ahead of pace" in the subject line. I printed it and put it on the corkboard above my desk next to the original engineering certification and a photo of the river the bridge was going to cross. I thought sometimes about what Renee had believed she was doing that night. I did not think she woke up that morning wanting to harm me. I think she had built a story over many years in which she was the center of this family and I was the absence. And at some point the story became real enough for her that it required an audience to make it official. The banquet was the audience. The microphone was the moment. I was supposed to stand there and let the story close around me like a room with no exit. I had walked out instead. That was the whole story, not the version Renee rehearsed for 2 weeks and performed for 50 people at a rented banquet hall. The actual one, the one that had been true the entire time, with or without documentation. The difference now was that the documentation existed, and the people who needed to see it had seen it. That was enough.